it is fantastic to yet again be in the great state of Michigan. Thank you all. And I got to say, we've got 7 days, or as we used to say in the Marine Corps, 7 days in a wake-up. We're going to win the state of Michigan. We're going to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. We're going to do it because of all of you. Now, we're so thrilled to be joined by the incredible Florida Representative Byron Donalds. Thank you so much, Byron, for being here. He's actually headed to Detroit as we speak. We're, of course, thrilled to be joined by the great state representative, Bill Schuett. Where's Bill? Bill, thank you. Everybody calls him Shooty, right? That's what they say about Bill, all right? We've got congressional candidate Paul Young. Where's Paul at? Thank you, Paul. God bless you, man. Thank you, Paul. Paul's got a tough race, but I think not only are Donald Trump and I going to win the state of Michigan, Paul's going to join us in the United States Congress. Thank you, Paul. He's working hard. God bless you, man. So I don't know if you saw it, but it looks like maybe the Kamala Harris campaign, they think that they've got a problem with young men. And so they decided the solution to this, I just saw this a couple days ago when I was reading the news, is to have Tim Walz, the VP candidate, play Madden football online with AOC. And that's how they're going to solve their problems with young men. Now, I saw that I guess Governor Walz said that AOC runs a mean pick six. Which, those of you who know football, like, you don't run a pick six. A pick six is something that happens accidentally on the football field. You run like a spread offense or a West Coast offense. And it got me thinking, they parade Tim Walz around as some kind of a football genius, as a former football coach. And maybe I know more about football than Governor Tim Walz does. And that's appropriate in some ways, because I think that my running mate, Donald J. Trump, knows more about working at McDonald's than Kamala Harris does. Now, we have a lot of fun, I think, at the Trump-Vance events, in part because I feel like we're winning, and I think everybody can feel the energy on the ground. But we also have fun because we all agree in this room that politics is a little absurd from time to time, and sometimes we ought to poke fun at the absurdity of our political process. But you know what's the most absurd thing about American politics in 2024? That a person like Kamala Harris thinks she can actually lead the United States of America. I've never seen anything like it in my life, where when you ask Kamala Harris what she wants to do for the American people, ask specifically, Kamala Harris, how do you plan to fix the inflation that your policies have caused? How do you plan to make it more affordable for our fellow citizens to be able to buy groceries, for example? How are you going to fix the very problems that your policies created? She'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. And when you ask her, about the terrible chaos at the southern border, or the chaos that we have all over the globe, how are you going to address the problems that your policies cause? She'll say, well, when I worked at McDonald's, I was really good at making the hash browns. And I don't know if I even buy that she worked there, to the point I just made earlier, but even if she did, what the hell does that have to do with fixing the problems of the American people? And I think in 7 days, the great state of Michigan is going to tell Kamala Harris, we don't want any more of your word salad. We don't want any more of your broken policies. You are fired. Go back to California where you belong. We want a real president who fights for the American people. Now, we're of course in the great state of Michigan. As all of you know better than I do, Michigan has got a lot of proud traditions. It's got a lot of proud farming traditions, and I just met some farmers earlier today. But it's also got a proud tradition of manufacturing the American automobile. And I think that Donald Trump knows better than anybody that we have got to revive the American auto industry and help the workers who build American cars, and we're going to do that when he's back in the White House. Now, the Harris administration has tried to kill the auto industry, and unfortunately, they've made a little progress, but they luckily haven't finished the job. But if they get back into another 4 years in the Oval Office, I really do believe that everything that we've seen over the last 4 years, it's going to be accelerated, and Michigan auto workers are going to pay the price. Her obsession, both in the way that she talks about it, but especially in the policies that she has advanced, Kamala Harris's obsession with electric vehicles and forcing Americans to buy Chinese-made electric vehicles is going to destroy the Michigan auto industry. So Donald Trump and I take a slightly different approach to this, where Kamala Harris wants to destroy 117,000 Michigan auto jobs with costly EV mandates. Donald Trump and I believe you ought to be able to drive whatever the hell car you want to, because this is the United States of America, and we believe in personal freedom. So we're going to eliminate every single one of Kamala Harris's auto job killing regulations. We're going to start, we're going to use what, as President Trump says all the time, we're going to use tariffs to actually protect American industry and to protect American workers. You go to Europe or you go overseas, how many General Motors or how many Ford automobiles do you see in the streets of Europe? None. You know why? Because those countries have applied aggressive tariffs to the cars that we make right here in the state of Michigan. And it's very simple. We're going to offer them a very, very simple deal. Either number one, you let us sell Michigan automobiles all over the world, or number two, you're going to pay a big fat tariff when you try to bring foreign cars back into the American market. God bless you. And we're also going to do something that President Trump announced a couple of weeks ago. We are going to fight to eliminate taxes we're going to try to make the interest rates that we're paying on car loans, we're going to make those payments tax deductible and save Michigan families some of their hard-earned money, but also help Michigan auto workers in the process. Now, the thing about Kamala Harris's economic proposals, not just when it comes to American-made automobiles, but on pretty much everything, is I think that she's got it exactly upside down. Think about this. Kamala Harris is the first politician I've ever seen in my life who goes around telling you that she wants to raise your taxes to the tune of thousands of dollars on Michigan auto families. She is bragging. Michigan auto families and Michigan, just everybody else too, she's bragging about the fact that she wants to raise your taxes and make you pay more to the federal government. At the same time, between the EV mandate and all the subsidies to foreign-made electric vehicles, she is rewarding foreign companies that ship American jobs overseas. Donald Trump, he's got a slightly different approach to this and thinks that Kamala Harris has got it exactly backwards. Why don't we cut the taxes of the hardworking Americans in this room, and why don't we penalize companies that are shipping American jobs overseas? That makes a lot more sense than what Kamala Harris is proposing. But because of her failed leadership, we got to remember that there is a lot that has gone wrong in the United States of America. I believe as much as I've ever believed in the promise of the United States of America, the last 3 months have taught me more about the kindness, the generosity of spirit, and the talent of the American people. But we are not going to enjoy the golden age of prosperity that we can if we do the same old tired things that we've been doing for the last 4 years. And as much as Kamala Harris pretends that she is the candidate of change, she is the sitting vice president. She signed off, she bragged about being the last person in the room after the disastrous policies of the last 4 years were made. You cannot, Kamala Harris, pretend that you had nothing to do with the Biden administration when you are the sitting vice president. You can't pretend you had nothing to do with the trillions of dollars in new spending when you cast the tie-breaking vote on trillions of dollars in new spending. You cannot pretend to be the candidate of change when your party has been running the show for the last 4 years and the American people have suffered because of it. So we're going to say, as Donald Trump loves to say to Kamala Harris, in just 7 short days, you're fired. We're taking back the Oval Office for the American people. Now, when you actually run through the statistics, just how bad Kamala Harris's economy has gotten, it's almost hard to believe. Gas prices in Michigan are up 45% since when Donald Trump left office. Home prices in Michigan are 41% higher. Over 9% of credit card balances and 8% of auto loans are delinquent in this great state. That means our fellow Americans are suffering. They need help. They need better leadership, and in 7 short days, that's exactly what we're going to give to our fellow Americans. Now, for the first time in 40 years, this is true, for the first time in 40 years, and I'm 40 years old, and I actually turned 40 a couple of months ago, and I used to go around and saying how bad I felt because I just turned 40. And then somebody who just turned 70 would come up to me and say, shut the hell up about being mad, about being 40 years old. That's right. But for the first time in my lifetime, our fellow Americans are saying they're worse off financially now than they were 40 years ago. So in some ways, the question of this election is very simple. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And if, like a majority of our citizens, the answer is no, then why not vote for change? Why not vote for the peace and prosperity of Donald J. Trump? But I think the fact that so many of our fellow citizens are telling us they're worse off, and they're telling us that because they are, that explains why Kamala Harris is going around running as far away as she can from the policies of Joe Biden. In fact, between her copying Donald Trump's policies and her pretending that she doesn't even know who Joe Biden is, I'm half convinced that tomorrow on the campaign trail, Kamala Harris is going to show up in a long red tie and a red MAGA hat, realizing that the American people just haven't had it anymore. She's copying all of Donald Trump's policies. She might as well copy his style too, Just complete the bit, Kamala. It's not working so far. Just lean into it a little bit more. But here's the thing. Every now and then we're given a gift in the Trump campaign. And that gift is that as much as Kamala, when she's staged or when she's got a teleprompter in front of us, as much as she pretends that she would be a candidate of change, every now and then she tells the truth. And she did that a couple of weeks ago at an interview that she did for The View. Now, has anybody seen this interview with The View? Most of you have not, and thank God for that. Now, see, you will never hear me complain about being your vice presidential nominee. It's the honor of my life to get to go around and ask for you all to make me your next vice president. The coolest thing in the world. I'm thrilled about it. But here's the one thing that I'll complain about. Sometimes I watch Kamala Harris on The View so that you don't have to. That is the life of service that I've chosen, is I will watch Kamala Harris on The View to protect you fine people from having to do that. And 2 weeks ago, she goes on The View, and this is a softball of all softball interviews, right? Every single one of these people is voting for her. They're having her on the show to help her, to try to distance from Joe Biden, and they ask her this question, softball question, Kamala Harris, would you have done anything differently over the last 4 years? And she kind of looks in the distance and goes, well, nothing comes to mind. Now, in defense of our illustrious vice president, that could be the campaign motto of the Waltz the Harris-Walz campaign. Nothing comes to mind. Think about it. What is Kamala Harris going to do to fix the broken border? Nothing comes to mind. What is Kamala Harris going to do to lower the price of groceries? Nothing comes to mind. It's actually the perfect campaign slogan for a campaign that has no substance at all. But it drives home how much she has been dishonest with the American people. Because given an opportunity, without a teleprompter in front of her, to say what she would have done differently, she gave an honest answer. It would have been exactly the same. And if we give this person 4 more years in the Oval Office, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be more of the broken policies on the economy. It's going to be more shipping Michigan manufacturing jobs to China. It's going to be more of the high prices, and it's going to be more of the broken southern border. So let's get out there and vote for a candidate of change. Let's get Donald J. Trump back in the White House. Now, I want to connect some of the biggest problems we have to what's going on, and I think is the biggest problem we have, which is that broken down southern border. Because when Kamala Harris came into the office, she bragged. They bragged about undoing all of Donald Trump's successful border policies. They said they were going to implement open borders, and that's exactly what they did. They said they were going to suspend deportations, and that's exactly what they did. They said they were going to stop Donald Trump's wildly successful Remain in Mexico policy, and that is exactly what they did. Now, of course, they'd like to run away from it now because they recognize the American people are pissed off about the open border. But I wanted to remind everybody in the state of Michigan that this wide open southern border, it's not just bad because of the law and order problems. It's not just bad because it means that Mexican drug cartels are doing business in the state of Michigan, and they are. It's bad because of the effect that it's having on the affordability crisis affecting citizens in the state of Michigan. Think about this. When you let 25 million people into your country, you got to put them somewhere. And we know sometimes, by the way, they're staying at 5-star hotels on your dime. But we also know that they're going into homes that ought by right go to American citizens. Now, we believe, Donald Trump and I believe, and we're going to fight for this, that if we have smarter economic policies, we can lower mortgage interest rates and make it easier for you to afford to buy a home. We believe that if we lower the ridiculous regulations and build more houses, we're going to make it easier for our young people to afford the American dream of homeownership. And we've got to do that. It's very important. But we got to be honest. No matter how many homes you build, if you allow homes that ought by right go to American citizens, go to illegal aliens, then we are never going to make it affordable for our young people to buy a home. So here is the most simple and the most important thing that we can do to make the American dream of homeownership affordable again. Ensure that American homes go to American citizens, deport illegal aliens, and that is how you make the American dream more affordable again. And it's not just about making things more affordable again. It's about everything. Everywhere that I go, I hear about people who have been ravaged by the fentanyl epidemic. And if you know anything about my background, you know that I was raised by my grandmother because my mom struggled with opioid addiction for a big chunk of my early life. Now, I am very proud of my mom because she stands here today almost at the 10-year mark of sobriety. She's been clean and sober for coming up on 10 years. And I want all of our people, whether they're suffering from addiction themselves or they're a family member of somebody who is, I want all of you to have the same second chance that we got with my mom. But it's not going to happen unless we stop the flow of poison that the Mexican drug cartels are bringing into this country. We got to get it out of our country. But the only way that we're going to do that is to shut down that border, and the only way that we're going to do it, now that Kamala Harris has made the Mexican drug cartels the richest and most powerful criminal organizations in the world, the only way we're going to get our country back is if we do what Donald J. Trump has promised, use the United States military against those Mexican drug cartels and make America safe for American citizens again. When you take stock of this border crisis and you look at the numbers, it is overwhelming. And then when you talk to people who are actually affected by it, as so many of you have been, it becomes even more overwhelming. I was in Wisconsin yesterday. There have been Mexican drug cartel members arrested in rural Wisconsin, in rural Michigan. We have got people who shouldn't even be in this country hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the country of Mexico who are getting rich by doing crime in our communities. Now, I know we've got a lot of parents and we got a lot of grandparents out there. I want my children to grow up in a country that is safe enough for them to make a mistake or walk down the street without it ruining their lives. And here's what I mean by that. I was in Valdosta, Georgia, and if you've heard the name Valdosta, Georgia, it's probably because it got hit pretty hard by Hurricane Helene just a couple of weeks ago. But I was there a few weeks before it got hit by the hurricane. And I was in with the sheriffs, and they were showing me what's called the interdiction room, where they intercept all the drugs and the illegal guns that are brought into our country by these cartels. And, you know, there's a table in front of me. It's got machine guns and things that the cartels have been using. And then they've got all manner of drugs. You got bags of marijuana. You've got pills. You've got meth. You've got cocaine. And they showed me something that looked out of place, and it was a box of candy, like Sour Patches, Nerds candy. And I say, what is going on here with this box of candy? That doesn't belong here. You know, Sour Patch Kids, like my wife likes those. I'm more of a chocolate guy, but what the hell are Sour Patch Kids doing in the interdiction room? And they say, that's not Sour Patch Kids, that's not candy, that's drugs. That the Mexican drug cartels, they realize that they disguise it as candy, it's going to be more likely to get into our country. Now, we know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that a packet of that candy is going to show up on an American playground, and an American child is going to eat a piece of candy and pay for it with his or her life. And that is because of the failed leadership of Kamala Harris. We have got to get back to a place where our kids can live as children again, and they will when Donald J. Trump is back in the White House. Now, I want to say just one other thing, because I think it's important to reflect on how each of our respective campaigns is making our pitch to the American people, because I think it says a lot about who the candidates themselves are. We're not just voting red team versus blue team. We're voting for a person who's going to be president of the United States. I'd like to compare my running mate to the person at the top of the Democratic ticket. Remember, we all saw it a few months ago when President Trump took a bullet to the ear, nearly killed the man, and stood up seconds later and raised his fist in the air in defiance. We all remember that moment. How can we forget it? Half of you have it printed on your T-shirts, it looks like, but you should, because it was a proud moment. But here's the other thing. Something you probably haven't heard is about a month later, during the second assassination attempt on President Trump's life, and it's crazy to even say that, but it happened, I was sitting at home with my son in Cincinnati, and I get a call, and it's the president, and I said, "Hey, sir, what's going on?" He said, "JD, they just tried to do it again." And I said, "They tried to do what again?" He said, "They tried to shoot me again." And this was well before the news had become public. I guess I was the first person that he called to tell. And I said, "Well, how are you doing, sir? I mean, clearly physically you're okay, but, you know, how are you doing? That's a pretty traumatic thing that just happened." And he said, "Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm kind of pissed off because they wouldn't let me finish my round of golf. I was about to make a birdie on the 6th hole. I'm dead serious." That's what he said. I was more tore up about it than he was. And I realized in that moment that this is the kind of person that you actually want in the Oval Office of the United States of America, because, look, It's not an easy job, my friends. It's a stressful job, but who do we want in the Oval Office? Do we want a person who runs away from friendly American media interviews, or do we want a person who shows literal courage under fire? That's Donald J. Trump, and that's our president, and we're going to make him the whole country's president in just one short week. But that is the kind of man that is at the top of the Republican ticket. And let's compare how the Democrats are making their closing message to the American people. Because I don't think that I've ever seen a more disgraceful closing argument than what I've seen from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And look, it's fine. Look, politics is politics. I volunteered for this job. Criticize me, attack me, insult me. It's what I signed up for. But don't you dare insult the brave Americans who are fighting for this movement. Don't attack the voters of the United States of America. And that's what Kamala Harris is doing. Because you know what they compared just 2 days ago? We had this incredible rally. Over 100,000 people at Madison Square Garden in New York City. It was an incredible thing. We had patriots from all over the country showing up, speaking, volunteering, and of course we had over 100,000 New Yorkers who showed up for the rally itself. And you know what Governor Tim Walz and the entire Democrat machine have been comparing that rally to? A Nazi rally from the 1930s. They've been calling, rather than persuade their fellow Americans, they've decided that they're going to call their fellow Americans Nazis and fascists, and I think it's disgusting. And a person who would close out her campaign by running and attacking her fellow Americans has no business leading the greatest nation on earth. And it occurs to me that when they attack us as Nazis, it's so disgraceful because there are people in this room right now who have grandparents, who have parents, or who they themselves fought in World War II. I met a World War II veteran literally 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, and there he is right there. Thank you, sir. God bless you. And you think about this. This is a man who actually fought real Nazis, who actually cared enough about this country to put his life on the line for it. And you think about when Kamala Harris calls us Nazis, I couldn't help but think about this brave gentleman in the front row. I couldn't help but go and look at a photo of the people who stormed Normandy back in June of 1944. And I wonder, do you think those men today would like how their reputation and their brave and heroic deeds were being used by Kamala Harris's campaign? Here's my honest view. If you think that the men who stormed the beaches at Normandy did it to give taxpayer-funded sex changes to illegal aliens, do you think that the men who stormed the beaches at Normandy did it to ship all of our good manufacturing jobs off to China? Do you think the men who stormed the beaches at Normandy did it for a president who wants to open the American southern border? I don't think so. And in fact, I think that if you believe those men were fighting for taxpayer-funded sex changes and to open the American southern border, the technical term to describe you is a dipshit. And that is... So my message to Kamala Harris is, why don't you try persuading your fellow citizens? Why don't you try talking about how you're going to lower grocery prices? Why don't you try talking about how you're going to undo your own disastrous border policies? Do not dare go in front of the cameras and call your fellow citizens Nazis. If you want to lead this country, act like a leader and stop insulting your fellow citizens. And with all gratitude to everybody who served, with all gratitude to everybody who, of course, you're here, so I'm assuming that you're at least open to voting for the Trump-Vance ticket, but I think by the applause, more than open to it. I want us to not do what Kamala Harris is doing. And I want us to actually follow President Trump's lead here because, yeah, President Trump can dish it out as well as anybody. He's the best counterpuncher in American politics. But when President Trump goes after his political opponents, he goes after Kamala Harris and he goes after Tim Walz. He criticizes the people who stepped into the arena, which, again, is his right to do. Every person who steps into the arena asks for it. But you know what Donald Trump doesn't do? Donald Trump doesn't attack everybody who's going to vote for the other side as a fascist or a Nazi. He doesn't demean his fellow citizens, even the ones who aren't going to vote for him. And so I'd ask us to follow that lead. Let's give Kamala Harris and Tim Walz hell. Let's remind the American people that they can't afford groceries or housing because of the policies of Kamala Harris. Let's remind our fellow citizens that the open border is because Kamala Harris has failed to do her job. But let's remember that after we win, we are all the part of a great American family. And yes, even the people who voted against Kamala Harris, we love them and we want their peace and their prosperity too. Thank you. God bless you, Michigan. Thank you for having me, and I guarantee I'll be back. Thank you. Now, but before I hit the road, we do have a few reporters in the back, and I think we've got some local folks. So let's take a few questions from the local reporters.
Yes, James Felton from WNEM TV5. We are the CBS affiliate here in Saginaw.
How you doing, James?
Good. How are you?
Good.
All right. Every year since 2008, Saginaw County and Michigan have voted for the eventual winner of the presidential election. So for the path to 270, how important is it for your campaign to carry Saginaw County and Michigan?
Look, it's extremely important. Michigan is one of, if not the very most important battleground state. And to your point, Saginaw County is a very important part of the state of Michigan. But I think the folks here in Saginaw County, our argument is very simple and very direct. Is do you want to go back to the peace and prosperity of Donald J. Trump, or do you want to double down on the failed policies of the last 4 years? Because when you don't have to agree with everything that I say, you don't have to agree with everything that Donald Trump says. But when you look at the 1.5% inflation when Donald Trump was president, when you look at the fact that take-home pay was rising as fast as it had in 40 years, you look at the fact that the border was closed down and the world was more peaceful, I think a lot of Americans would just like to go back to the prosperity and the peace of Donald Trump's leadership. And that's what we're fighting for. So I feel very good about Saginaw County. I feel very good about the state of Michigan. Of course, the voters will make the ultimate decision, but I think the voters of this great state are going to vote for change. They're going to vote for peace. They're going to vote for prosperity. They're going to vote for Donald J. Trump. Thank you. Next question.
Hello, Senator. My name is AJ Jones, WCMU local public radio station. I have a question about foreign policy.
Sure.
This week, the Israeli parliament passed a law that would ban UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Agency for the Palestinians. The Biden administration opposed that decision. Now, I want to give you the floor here. Would a Trump-Vance administration support Israel banning UNRWA? And as a follow-up, would you earmark any federal aid for humanitarian causes in Gaza as the current administration has?
So, couple of things. First of all, of course, we want to save as many civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, as possible. The most important way to do that is to end the war. And this is why I think that Donald J. Trump, I've never seen anything like it in American politics, where you've got the people in the United States who are a little bit more pro-Palestinian and the people in the United States who are a little bit more pro-Israel. I think they recognize, both of them, that Donald J. Trump is the best candidate because he's the candidate of peace and prosperity. And that's a big difference. When you've got a chaotic leader like Kamala Harris, when you've got a person where fires just spring up all over the world, everybody knows that it's the innocent people who get caught up in the conflict who suffer the most. We cannot have an incompetent leader in the Oval Office. We can't have Kamala Harris. So to your specific question, look, my understanding about UNRWA is that you actually have explicit connections to terrorists for some of the employees on the ground there, right? That's disgraceful. And that means that whether it's the entire organization or certainly some of the people on the ground, they have to do better at vetting their people so that you don't actually have explicit terrorist connections. Again, we all want to save Palestinian civilians. We don't want to support the terrorists on the ground who are killing innocent Israelis in the process, right? And I think those goals are totally compatible. Let's save as many Palestinian lives as possible, but let's not empower the terrorists who are murdering innocent Israelis. We can do both of those things at the same time. Next question.
Hi, Senator. I'm Carol Thompson from the Detroit News. Thank you for taking a question. Given Elon Musk's large spending in this race, would a new Trump administration give preferential treatment to Tesla over the Detroit Big Three automakers?
No, of course not. Look, I'm personally thrilled to have Elon's support, and people have to remember, Elon was a center-left Clinton Democrat 4 years ago, and now he's putting on dark MAGA hats because he's sick of the craziness and wants to get back to common sense. And I think that's why. And I think that's why Elon is supporting our candidacy. It's not because he thinks that we're going to do anything for him. It's because he thinks that we're going to make the American nation more peaceful, more prosperous, and more secure, and that's what we're going to do. Now, of course, look, I love the big three automakers in the state of Michigan. I want the big three automakers to thrive and to survive, but they're not going to if we keep on forcing electric vehicles made in China down the throats of American consumers and American workers. So obviously, Elon is very interested in electric vehicles, and the president, ribs him from time to time that, look, if you want to make electric vehicles, great. We don't want to force anybody to drive anything. That's the whole point. But our belief is that the way to empower the American automobile industry is to let consumers decide and let Michigan workers do what they do best, which is make great automobiles. Next question.
Hi, Senator. Simon Levy in New York Times. My question is about your comments at a town hall with Moms for America, where you said that in an ideal world where illegal immigration is brought under control, those resources used to manage illegal immigration would be used to expand legal pathways of citizenship. Could you be specific how the Trump administration would dedicate resources to that, assuming illegal immigration is brought under control?
Well, look, you have people right now who are doing it the right way, who have been in some backlog for years, and they're not able to have their claims processed because we're spending so much money on illegal immigration that we're not doing anything other than basically facilitating the massive illegal invasion into the United States of America. That has to stop. And when it does stop, not only will we save resources that can better be used, I mean, look, if a person has done everything the right way and needs to have their claims processed, we ought to process their claims so long as they're following the law. We should not be facilitating illegal immigration to this country. So spend money on one thing, don't spend money on the illegal immigration. I think that's pretty simple. But the other thing we have to be honest about is that we are actually spending ourselves into bankruptcy by spending on illegal aliens instead of American citizens. And this is a very serious problem. Kamala Harris, it's so interesting. One of the many lies of their campaign is that she says Republicans are going to go after Social Security and Medicare. You know what's going to bankrupt Social Security and Medicare? Giving it to illegal aliens, which is exactly what she's promised to do. It's very simple. Now, I've seen estimates from anywhere between $100 billion or $400 billion. That's the amount of money that we spend on illegal aliens in this country every single year. We're talking about Medicare fraud, Social Security fraud. We're talking about housing benefits, welfare benefits. Why can't we have a United States government, an American leader that focuses on the people who have the legal right to be here. Why can't we do that? I just don't get it. And I don't understand. And I don't understand why Kamala Harris thinks that it's racist for the American people to have a border. I don't understand why Kamala Harris thinks that she ought to accuse her fellow citizens rather than solve the problems that she created. I don't know. I've never seen a campaign in the history of the United States of America that when confronted with a massive problem like the illegal immigration problem of Kamala Harris, instead of saying, you know what, I screwed up, I'm going to fix it, Kamala Harris attacks her fellow citizens and tries to silence them. I think it is disgraceful. We ought to have an American leader who, when the American people are drowning in illegal immigration, says, you know what, we're going to help you and we're going to solve the problem rather than attacking you for noticing the problem. And now, I want to leave you with one final thought, my friends, and I want to make sure I got my notes here because I don't want to screw this part up. This is the most important part because I want to ask you three things. Three things before you guys leave here today. Number one, I want you to go, or you can do this at home, go to the website swampthevoteusa.com. That's where you can check your registration, check your polling location, check your absentee ballot request, or if you're so inclined, get involved in some of the ground game that we have here in the state of Michigan. That's swampthevoteusa.com. Number two, this is the second thing I'm going to ask. I want you guys to get out there and talk about why you're voting for Donald J. Trump, especially on social media, on text message, on email, whatever method of communication you use. Get out there and tell people why you're voting for Donald J. Trump. Because again, Kamala Harris and her corporate media allies, they're never going to tell the truth about this movement and about our candidate, but you can tell the truth. And if you do that, we're going to win the state of Michigan. And this is the third and final thing. I want to get every single person in this auditorium, in this gymnasium, every single person, get out there and vote 10 times. Now, our friend from the New York Times is going to be headline news later that J.D. Vance comes to Saginaw and encourages mass voter fraud. Here is the legal way. The legal way to vote 10 times is take yourself to the polls and get 9 of your friends and family to go along with you. That's the legal way. Because I think, the stakes, the media tries to make this much more complicated than it is. We're trying to make sure that our fellow citizens have leadership that is fit to serve in the White House. We want our fellow citizens to be able to afford groceries. We want our fellow citizens to be able to afford housing. We want our fellow citizens to have a secure southern border and safe neighborhoods. And the only way we're going to do that is if we fix the broken leadership in Washington, D.C. In 7 days, my friends, that's exactly what we're going to do. Donald J. Trump for president. Let's get it done. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Hello.